What happens when the truth about your past is exposed and you finally stop pretending to be the family's forgotten child? Clara's life seemed perfect on the outside: a senior position, a luxury apartment, independence from her family. But everything changed when her grandmother called with news about her parents' housewarming party. After years of silence, Clara learned the real reason her parents never wanted her around. She wasn't their choice. Stay tuned to see how Clara confronts her past, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Clara. At 29, I had built the life I always dreamed of: climbing to a senior position at Morgan & Reed Investments, living in a luxury apartment in downtown Boston, and most importantly, gaining complete independence from my so-called family. "Clara, sweetie," my grandmother's familiar voice came through the phone, warm and comforting. "I just wanted to let you know your parents and Lily moved into their new house." She paused, the hesitation evident in her voice. "They're planning a housewarming party in 3 weeks." A smirk tugged at my lips. "Are you and Grandpa going?" "No, dear. We're not feeling well enough for all that noise and commotion," she sighed. I could almost picture her sitting in her favorite armchair, probably knitting another scarf for the winter. "Your grandfather's arthritis is acting up again." "Take care of yourselves," I said, genuine concern filling my voice. My grandparents were the only family I still cared about. "I'll visit you both soon." "That would be lovely, dear. We miss you." Another pause, and then, almost tentatively, she added, "Clara, I know things are complicated, but maybe—" "Grandma," I interrupted gently, "we both know they won't invite me, and that's fine." After hanging up, I walked over to my floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city skyline. My reflection looked back at me, a woman in a tailored suit, confident and powerful, far from the unwanted child I once was. The irony didn't escape me. My parents' new house was probably modest compared to my sleek apartment, but they would never know that. I'd made sure to keep my success private, staying off social media for years. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Brianna, my best friend from college. "Don't you dare back out of your birthday party tomorrow," she said, no pleasantries. "I've already ordered the cake and convinced half the office to come." I chuckled. "In my own apartment? That would be quite the feat." "Seriously, Clara, you need to celebrate. 30 is approaching and you're crushing it at life. Let's show it off a little. Take some photos, post them online, and show the world that Clara Mitchell is living her best life." I hesitated. For years, I'd kept my life private, deliberately disconnected from my past, but maybe Brianna was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "Fine," I finally agreed, "but nothing too crazy." "Too late!" she practically screamed. "I've already hired a photographer." The photographer Brianna hired was worth every penny. My apartment looked like something out of an architectural magazine. Marble countertops gleaming, city lights twinkling through the windows, and everyone looking effortlessly glamorous and happy. After years of social media silence, I finally posted the pictures. "Look at you, girl!" Brianna exclaimed, scrolling through the comments. "Your post is blowing up." I glanced at my phone. The likes and comments were flooding in. Former classmates, colleagues, and even distant relatives were all amazed by my apparent success. It felt surreal, like I was shedding the mask I'd worn for so many years, finally revealing the woman I had become. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Clara, it's Mom. I got your number from your grandmother." My stomach clenched. Eleanor Mitchell's voice, artificially cheerful, brought back a flood of unwanted memories. "I saw your photos online. Your apartment is impressive. We had no idea you were doing so well." "Of course you didn't," I thought. "You never bothered to ask." "We're having that housewarming party next weekend," she pressed on. "We'd love for you to come. Everyone would be so happy to see you." I bet they would, now that I'm successful. "I'll think about it," I replied coldly, then hung up. Sitting on my couch, staring at the city below, memories started flooding back. Memories I tried so hard to suppress. I wasn't supposed to exist. My mother was 22, fresh out of college when she got pregnant. She and Dad had big plans, traveling, building careers, enjoying their youth. A baby wasn't part of that picture. "Mrs. Mitchell," I could almost hear the doctor's voice from the story my grandmother once told me. An abortion could compromise your ability to have children in the future. So they kept me, not out of love or desire, but out of fear of future regret. As soon as I was born, they started leaving me with my grandparents, first for weekends, then for weeks at a time. My earliest memories weren't of my parents' house, but of my grandparents' cozy home, the smell of Grandma's cookies, the sound of Grandpa's laugh, the feeling of being genuinely wanted. They gave me what my parents couldn't or wouldn't. Everything changed when I turned 6. My grandparents finally put their foot down. "She needs to go to school," Grandma told my parents firmly. "She needs stability, her own home. You can't keep passing her around like this." "But she's happy here," my mother protested weakly. "She meets her parents weekly." Grandpa's voice was unusually stern. "It's time you step up and take responsibility." By then, my parents had established their careers and bought a house. They reluctantly agreed to take me back, but I later learned they had other plans brewing. They wanted another child, a planned one this time. I was 7 when Mom announced her pregnancy. I remember her glowing face, Dad's proud smile, the way they decorated the nursery months in advance, everything I never got. Lily was born on a bright spring morning. From the moment they brought her home, the contrast in how they treated us was stark. While I ate breakfast alone before school, Mom would spoon-feed Lily with airplane noises. When I got straight A's on my report card, Dad barely glanced at it before returning to helping Lily with her finger painting. "Mom, I got the lead role in the school play," I announced one evening. "That's nice, honey," she responded absently, not looking up from recording Lily's first steps on her phone. I stopped telling them about my achievements after a while. Instead, I'd ride my bike to my grandparents' house after school, where someone actually cared. "Show me that report card again," Grandpa would say, his face lighting up with pride. "My brilliant girl." They remembered every birthday, every school event. When I won the science fair in 5th grade, they were the only ones in the audience. My parents had taken Lily to her dance recital instead. "We'll have cake when we get back," Mom had promised that morning, but they didn't return until late. Lily was tired from dancing, so they postponed my birthday celebration. It never happened. The pattern continued year after year. They forgot my piano recital, where I played the opening solo. They missed my middle school graduation, claiming Lily had a cold. When I won a state-level math competition, they were at Lily's soccer practice. Meanwhile, Lily's life was meticulously documented. Every lost tooth warranted a family celebration. Her first bike ride was photographed from every angle. When she made the junior cheerleading squad, our room was decorated with balloons for a week. I found solace in my studies and my grandparents' unconditional love. Every weekend, I'd escape to their house, where Grandma would listen to my stories and Grandpa would help me with my homework. "You're going to do great things, Clara," Grandma would say, slipping me a new book or a small trinket. "Just you wait and see." But at home, I was invisible unless Lily needed something. Then, I became the ill-paid babysitter, the tutor, the convenient older sister who could drive her to friends' houses. Lily grew more insufferable with each passing year. By the time she was 9, she had become a master manipulator, knowing exactly how to twist our parents around her finger. "You're just the mistake they got stuck with," she'd taunt me. "Nobody wants you here." I usually ignored her jabs, but one day, when I was 17, she crossed the line. I was studying for my AP exams when she barged into my room. "Move your stuff. I need your desk for my art project," she demanded. "I'm studying, Lily. Use your own desk." "No, I want this one. Mom and Dad said I could have whatever I want in this house." "That's not true, and I'm busy." She started throwing my textbooks on the floor. "You're so selfish. You're just jealous because Mom and Dad love me more." Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration and anger finally erupted. I grabbed her phone out of her hand. "Give it back!" she shrieked. "No!" I said, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You're grounded. Go to your room and think about how you treat people." She stomped off, screaming threats about telling our parents. I didn't care. Someone had to teach her about consequences. When Mom and Dad came home, Lily put on her performance. Crocodile tears streamed down her face as she spun her tale, twisting everything I'd said and done. I could hear the words she would use the way she would make herself the victim, as always. But this time, I didn't care. This time, I wasn't going to back down. "She hit me," Lily sobbed, "and she took my phone and locked me in my room." "I never hit her," I said calmly. "I took her phone because she was being disrespectful and destroying my study materials." Mom's face turned red with anger. "How dare you touch your sister?" "Give me your phone," Dad demanded. "You're grounded for a month, no going out except for school." "I have the class trip this weekend." "Canceled," Mom snapped. "Maybe this will teach you to be kinder to your sister." For the next month, they acted like I didn't exist. They'd walk past me in hallways without acknowledgement. At dinner, they'd talk around me as if I were invisible. Lily smirked throughout it all, knowing she'd won. That was the moment I truly understood. These people weren't my family. They were just strangers who happened to share my DNA. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only my grandparents in the audience. Mom had told them I wasn't worthy of their presence. My valedictorian speech earned a standing ovation, but the 2 empty seats in the family section spoke volumes. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Grandma said afterward, hugging me tight. "Where are your parents?" asked Mrs. Thompson, my favorite teacher. I just shrugged. By then, their absence had become the most natural thing in the world. The day after graduation, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. I knew from their expressions that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "You're 18 now," Dad started, his voice businesslike. "An adult. It's time for you to move out." Mom added bluntly, not even trying to soften the blow. I discreetly pressed record on my phone, sliding it partially under my thigh on the couch. Something told me I needed to document this moment. "What about college?" I asked, though I already knew their answer. I just wanted it on record. They actually laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that echoed through the room. "We're not paying for your education," Dad said. "That money is for Lily's future." Finally, Mom sighed, dropping all pretense, running her fingers through her hair with visible relief. "We can stop being responsible for you." "Let's be honest," Dad continued, his voice cold as ice. "We never wanted you to be born. Your mother couldn't get an abortion because of medical risks, so we were stuck with you." "You were never part of this family," Mom added, examining her manicured nails as if discussing the weather. "Not really, and now it's time for you to go." I sat there, letting my phone capture every word, every cruel laugh, every moment of truth I'd always known, but they'd never admitted so openly. My hands were steady in my lap, years of practice keeping my emotions hidden. "I'll leave tomorrow," I said quietly, proud that my voice didn't waver. Their relief was palpable, like a weight lifting from their shoulders. "Good," Dad nodded. "No drama. At least you're making this easy." From upstairs, Lily's voice carried down the hallway, excited and shrill. "I'm going to turn her room into a gaming paradise, a huge TV, new console, maybe even a streaming setup. It's going to be amazing." I packed that night, listening to Lily's excited planning through the wall. 18 years of life fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. The next morning, I took a taxi to my grandparents' house. When I told them everything, showing them the recording, Grandma burst into tears, her hands shaking as she held mine. "Those aren't the people we raised," Grandpa said, his voice breaking, years of disappointment evident in his eyes. I showed them something else, too. My acceptance letter to Harrison Business School's investment program, full scholarship, including housing. My hands trembled slightly as I handed them the envelope, but this time with pride. "They wanted me so badly they're even paying for my dorm room," I explained, allowing myself a small smile. My trades and recommendations impressed them. The dean personally called to offer me the scholarship. Grandma hugged me tight, her familiar lavender scent wrapping around me like a comfort blanket. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart, so very proud." "Please don't tell them," I asked, pulling back to look at both of them. "They don't deserve to know." "They don't," Grandpa agreed bitterly, his weathered hand squeezing my shoulder. "Your success will be yours alone." That night, in the dim light of my old childhood bedroom at my grandparents' house, I finally let myself break. For years, I had buried it all, everything from the past, but tonight, I let the tears fall. The weight of it all, the years of pretending I was fine, crashed over me. That fall, I left for Harrison Business School with nothing but 2 suitcases and an unshakable determination. My new life began in a tiny dorm room overlooking the campus quad, but for the first time, it felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that even surprised me. Investment analysis came naturally. The numbers spoke clearly, telling stories with the precision I had never found in the mess of emotions I left behind. The patterns, the predictions, the careful balance of risk and reward, it all clicked. I felt in control, in a way I never had before. Between classes, I secured prestigious internships. Goldman Sachs in my sophomore year, Morgan & Reed in my junior year. Each success was another notch on the belt of my self-made future, far away from the mess I had left behind. "Clara, you're exactly what we look for in future analysts," my supervisor at Morgan & Reed said during my evaluation. "Your attention to detail is remarkable, and your market insights are beyond your years." At that moment, I didn't just feel validated, I felt seen. But I didn't let myself feel too much. I had learned how to bury emotions and focus on results. My personal life remained quiet. When Grandma called weekly, she sometimes started with, "Your sister," or "your parents." "Please, Grandma," I'd gently interrupt. "I don't want to know." She'd sigh and then shift the conversation to her garden or Grandpa's bowling league. They were my only connection to the past, and even with them, I kept certain doors firmly shut. Each week, our conversations danced around everything and nothing. Recipes she was trying, books I was reading, the changing seasons, carefully sidestepping the family-shaped void between us. After graduation, Morgan & Reed offered me a full-time position immediately. I started as a junior analyst, but it wasn't long before my insights into market trends caught management's attention. I worked late into the night, taking on extra projects and volunteering for the toughest cases that others avoided. "Mitchell, the Thompson portfolio numbers are impressive," my boss remarked during my first year. "Keep this up and you'll go far. We haven't seen analysis this thorough from a junior analyst in years." His praise only fueled me further. Each year brought more responsibility, and with it, raises. I moved from a cramped studio to a 1-bedroom apartment, and then to a spacious 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Each move was a step further away from the life I had left behind. By the time I turned 28, I was managing my own team and overseeing major client portfolios. My coworkers joked that I lived and breathed investments, but the truth was, work was the only thing that filled the void where family should have been. Every success felt like a small act of rebellion. Every promotion was proof that I was finally worth something, that I wasn't invisible anymore. The day I closed on my luxury apartment downtown, I stood alone in the empty space, watching the sunset paint the city gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, careful saving, and strategic investments had led me here. The marble countertops, the hardwood floors, the breathtaking view. I had built this life entirely on my own, with no help from the people who were supposed to support me. And then, my phone buzzed. My mother had sent a text about a housewarming party. After 11 years of silence, they wanted to see me? Fine. I'd let them see exactly what they had thrown away. The recording from that last day, the one I had kept on my phone, transferred through every upgrade and every phone change, was still there, waiting, ready for the right moment. I typed a quick response. "I'll be there." My mother's reply came instantly. "Wonderful! Can't wait to see you, sweetheart." I took a day off work and drove to my parents' new house. It was a modest 2-story in a middle-class neighborhood, nice, but nothing compared to my downtown apartment. Several cars already lined the driveway when I arrived, and I could hear laughter drifting through open windows. My hand hesitated on the car door handle. 11 years. I took a deep breath, grabbed my housewarming gift, an expensive bottle of wine I knew they couldn't afford, and walked up the path. Aunt Marie spotted me first. "Clara! Oh my goodness, it's been forever!" She wrapped me in a perfume-heavy hug. "Where have you been hiding?" Other relatives crowded around, a chorus of excited greetings and questions. "How's the big city? We saw your apartment online. Why don't you visit anymore? You look so successful." I smiled politely, offering non-committal shrugs. Let them wonder. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my cousins whispering, comparing my designer outfit to the more modest attire around us. Then my parents appeared in the doorway. Mom's hair had more gray than I remembered. Dad's middle had thickened. Behind them stood Lily, her face a careful mask. The years had changed us all. "Clara!" Mom rushed forward, arms outstretched, her voice syrupy sweet. "My baby girl!" Dad joined the embrace. "We've missed you so much. We're so proud of everything you've achieved." Their performance was flawless. If I hadn't lived through the reality, I might have believed it myself the way Mom's hands clutched my shoulders, how Dad's voice cracked with emotion. They'd had years to perfect this act. The party moved inside. Wine flowed, food circulated, and relatives caught up on years of missed moments. I noticed how my parents kept touching my arm, laughing too loudly at my comments, making sure everyone saw their devotion to their long-lost daughter. The modest living room was cramped with family members, all stealing glances at me between bites of cheese and crackers. Uncle George stood up during dinner, wine glass in hand, his face slightly flushed from the alcohol. A toast to Eleanor and Richard on their beautiful new home. Cheers erupted around the table. "And Clara," he continued, his tone shifting, his eyes narrowing. "I have something to say to you, young lady." The room went still. Forks froze mid-bite. A glass clinked nervously against a plate. "How dare you abandon your family like this?" His voice rose with indignation. "Getting rich and successful while refusing to even call your poor parents. They've been heartbroken, wondering what they did wrong, crying over their ungrateful daughter." My stomach twisted as I glanced at my parents' faces' perfectly crafted concern, manufactured hurt. Mom even managed to squeeze out a tear. "The true saint for forgiving me," Uncle George continued, his voice growing louder with righteous fury. "After everything they did for you, all their sacrifices, how could you treat them this way?" I looked around the table at my relatives' disapproving faces. My parents had spent 11 years spinning their story, painting themselves as the victims of their ungrateful daughter who had abandoned them for wealth and success. I cleared my throat, the weight of years of silence pressing down on me. "Mom, would you like to tell everyone the truth?" She straightened in her chair, radiating the confidence of a practiced performance. "Actually, yes. Living with Clara was always difficult. She was spoiled, arrogant, ungrateful for everything we gave her." She glanced around the table, locking eyes with each relative. "She ran away after high school, abandoned us, never looked back. No calls, no visits. We were devastated." Relatives shook their heads sympathetically, wine glasses tilting slightly. Lily dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, the same fake tears she had perfected as a child. "Let me share something," I said, pulling out my phone. "A recording from the day I left. I was 18. Mom's face went pale. Dad's grip on his fork tightened. The room fell completely silent as my teenage voice filled the space. "What about college?" Then came my parents' cruel, mocking laugh. "We're not paying for your education. That money is for Lily's future." My dad's cold voice followed. "We never wanted you to be born. Your mother couldn't get an abortion because of medical risks, so we were stuck with you. You were never part of this family." The recording hit like hammer blows in the suffocating silence. Aunt Marie's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide in shock. Cousin Rachel's eyes welled with tears. Uncle George's face darkened with each revelation. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft tick of the wall clock. "This is why I left," I said quietly. "Ask Grandma and Grandpa. They took me in that day. They were there when you kicked me out." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, every eye on me. "You only invited me today because you saw my success online. Before that, 11 years of silence. Not a single call, not a birthday card, nothing." Uncle George's face had drained of color. His righteous anger evaporated, leaving only shame. "Eleanor! Richard, how could you?" Guests began pushing back their chairs, the scraping sounds filling the room like a discordant symphony. Aunt Marie couldn't even look at my parents. "You monsters," she whispered, gathering her purse with trembling hands. "Clara, "I'm so sorry," Uncle George said, heading for the door. "I didn't know. I should have asked." Others followed, murmuring about cruel lies and disgraceful behavior. The house emptied quickly, the door opening and closing with the finality of their hasty exits. My parents and Lily stayed at the table, their faces contorted in rage. The perfect family facade had finally cracked. "You ruined everything!" Mom shrieked, mascara running down her face. "How dare you!" "We took you in!" Dad shouted, as if he had forgotten the recording we had all just heard. "You wanted me here," I replied calmly, smoothing my dress. "I just played your game. The only difference is I brought receipts." I walked out of their house for the last time, the sound of Lily's angry sobs following me down the path. Through my grandmother, I later learned that most of our relatives had cut ties with my parents. The truth had cost them more than just their reputation. Today, I have friends who chose me, colleagues who respect me, and the peace that comes with finally exposing a lie. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well on your own terms. What do you do when the people who should love you the most betray you, twist the truth, and manipulate the story to fit their narrative? Clara spent years hiding from her past, building a life far removed from the family who never truly cared about her. She gave them everything: her support, her money, her time, hoping one day they would see her for who she was. But when her success finally shone through, they came crawling back. Not because they wanted her, but because they saw her as a symbol of something they could exploit. When Clara showed up at their housewarming party, it wasn't about reconciliation, it was about making sure the truth came to light. And when she played the recording of her parents' cruel words, their mask of loving parents fell apart. For once, Clara wasn't the invisible one. The truth was now undeniable. Clara made the right choice. She walked away from the family who never truly saw her, and her life is better for it. She's found peace in her own success, surrounded by people who respect and value her. So, what would you do if you were in Clara's shoes? Would you have confronted the lies or kept walking away? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you found this story powerful, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that expose the truth.
Yet another exhausting day. I sighed as I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag by the door. The aroma of Greg's famous spaghetti bolognese wafted from the kitchen, beckoning me. But before indulging, I had to check my email. I settled onto the couch, laptop in hand, scanning through the usual work updates and notifications. That's when an unfamiliar email from Greg's account caught my eye. Curiosity piqued. I opened it, only to be greeted by a fancy restaurant reservation. For two. My brow furrowed as I reread the details. This couldn't be right. Greg and I hadn't planned any special occasions. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as doubts began to surface. "Greg?" I called out, my voice edged with tension. "Can you come here for a second?" Moments later, he emerged from the kitchen, that easy grin of his plastered across his face. "What's up, babe?" I studied him, searching for any tells, but his expression remained infuriatingly nonchalant. Wordlessly, I pivoted the laptop, the incriminating email on full display. Greg's features froze, just for an instant, before that familiar mask of innocence slipped back into place. "Oh, that? It's nothing, just a mix-up at work." "A mix-up?" I echoed, skepticism lacing my words. "For a romantic dinner reservation?" He shrugged, maintaining an air of indifference that grated on my every nerve. "You know how it is, the admin team gets things crossed sometimes." Every fiber of my being screamed that he was lying. But without proof, I knew pressing the issue would only lead to another circular argument, something we'd become all too familiar with lately. So I forced a tight smile and nodded. "If you say so." But even as we settled in for dinner, the lingering doubts gnawed at me. This wasn't just a simple mix-up. I could feel it in my bones. Greg was hiding something, and I intended to find out what. That night, I tossed and turned, Greg's deceit weighing heavily on my mind. As a social worker, I developed a keen sense for sniffing out lies. It came with the territory, and every instinct told me that my husband was hiding something big. The next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. While Greg was at work, I fired up my laptop and started digging. It didn't take long to locate his email account. We'd never been the type to hide passwords from each other, at least not until recently. I felt a pang of guilt as I scrolled through his inbox, but my conscience was quickly overshadowed by what I found, a lengthy email chain between Greg and someone saved only as GS. The contents made my blood run cold. Flirtatious banter, intimate details, and plans for secret rendezvous, all right there in black and white. My hands trembled as I copied the damning evidence onto a flash drive, knowing I needed to gather more proof. That's when I remembered the woman I'd seen Greg meeting a few weeks back. At the time, I'd brushed it off as a work contact, but now, I couldn't be so sure. With a renewed sense of determination, I grabbed my keys and headed out, tailing Greg from a discreet distance. I watched as he stopped at a quaint cafe, taking a seat at an intimate corner table. And then she arrived, a petite blonde with a dazzling smile that seemed all too familiar. My heart pounded in my ears as she leaned in, greeting Greg with an affectionate embrace. The way they held each other, the lingering glances, it was painfully intimate, like two lovers reuniting after a long absence. White-hot anger surged through my veins, followed swiftly by a bitter chill of betrayal. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, my husband was having an affair. I wanted nothing more than to storm in and confront them both right then and there. But I knew that would only give Greg the upper hand, allowing him to twist the narrative as he so often did. No, I needed to play this smart, gather enough evidence to back him into a corner, leaving him nowhere to hide from the truth. Only then could I truly make him pay for his deceit. With a deep, steadying breath, I turned and headed back to my car, already formulating my next move. Greg had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, a mistake he would soon come to regret. A few days later, I found myself at a social workers networking event, the perfect opportunity to gather more intel on Greg's mystery woman. As I mingled with colleagues, a familiar face caught my eye. Mira Johnson, an old friend from college. "Marlena, I didn't know you'd be here," Mira exclaimed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Her eyes sparkled with genuine delight, a refreshing change from the fake smiles I'd grown accustomed to. "It's been too long," I replied with a smile, relaxing into the comforting familiarity of her presence. "We really need to catch up properly." Mira nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Oh, you'll never guess who I ran into last week." My heart skipped a beat, wondering if fate was about to deliver the answers I'd been desperately seeking. "Who?" "Gwendolyn Smith," she exclaimed. "Remember her? That girl you two were always fighting over in our dorm days?" The name hit me like a punch to the gut, the memories flooding back in an instant. Gwendolyn, the blonde bombshell who'd made our college years a living hell with her petty jealousies and relentless pursuit of any guy who caught her eye, including my then-boyfriend, Derek. "Gwendolyn," I repeated, my tone laced with disdain. "What's she been up to these days?" Mira's expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. "Well, that's the thing. She seemed really chummy with your husband, Greg." The words hung in the air like a lead weight, confirming my worst suspicions. It all made sense now. The secret emails, the hushed meetings, the lingering glances. Greg's mysterious woman was none other than my old nemesis, Gwendolyn Smith. That lying, cheating snake, I spat, my hands balling into fists at my sides. He's been carrying on an affair with her this whole time. Mira's eyes widened in shock, her mouth falling open. "No way. Are you serious? Greg always seemed so devoted to you." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head bitterly. "Apparently not. That bastard's been playing me for a fool." Anger and humiliation washed over me in waves, threatening to drown me in their intensity. But I couldn't let the emotion consume me. Not yet. I needed to stay focused, to gather enough evidence to nail them both to the wall. "Mira, I need your help," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Tell me everything you know about Gwendolyn and her history with Greg." To her credit, Mira didn't hesitate, launching into a detailed account of their apparent closeness and Gwendolyn's thinly veiled disdain for me. With each new revelation, the pieces fell into place, painting a picture of a calculated, long-simmering scheme for revenge. By the time Mira finished, my jaw was set in grim determination. Greg and his mistress had made a fatal mistake in underestimating me, and they were about to pay dearly for it. That evening, I confronted Greg the moment he walked through the door. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, arms crossed over my chest. He barely batted an eye, shrugging off his jacket with a casual air that made my blood boil. "Sure, what's up?" "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped, glaring at him. "I know all about your little affair with Gwendolyn Smith." For a split second, Greg's mask slipped, his eyes widening ever so slightly, but he quickly recovered, letting out a dismissive scoff. "Gwendolyn? Are you serious right now? That's just crazy talk." "Is it?" I challenged, stepping closer until we were nearly nose to nose. "Because I have proof, Greg. Emails, eyewitness accounts, everything." His gaze hardened, jaw clenching. "You've been spying on me? Real classy, Marlena. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me." I exploded, my voice rising with each word. "You're the one carrying on an affair behind my back." Greg's expression darkened, an ugly sneer twisting his features. "Maybe if you hadn't been so wrapped up in your precious career, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for attention." The words hit me like a slap across the face, striking at the very insecurities he knew I harbored. For a moment I faltered, doubts creeping in, until I remembered the truth staring me in the face. "Don't try to play the victim here," I spat, regaining my fire. "This has nothing to do with me or my job. It's about you and your sick need for attention, no matter who you have to hurt in the process." Greg opened his mouth, likely to spew more venom, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it. I'm done listening to your lies." I stepped back, squaring my shoulders with renewed determination. "From now on, I'll be fighting fire with fire. And when the smoke clears, you and your little mistress are going to wish you'd never crossed me." With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind me with a satisfying bang. I could feel the tide shifting, the paradigm between us irrevocably altered. Greg's betrayal had awakened a fury within me that wouldn't be sated until he paid the ultimate price. As I slid behind the wheel of my car, a plan began to take shape. If Greg wanted to play dirty, then so be it. But this time, I'd be holding all the cards. The first step? Gathering undeniable proof of his misdeeds, the kind that would leave no room for his usual manipulation tactics. I knew just where to plant a hidden camera to catch him in the act, red-handed. With a grim smile, I started the engine and peeled out of the driveway, my sights set on victory. Greg had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. Permanently. The hidden camera was a stroke of genius. I'll give myself that. Within days, I had all the proof I needed of Greg's sordid affair, captured in damning high definition. I watched in sickened silence as the footage played out, Greg and Gwendolyn tangled in a heated embrace, their bodies moving in a sickening rhythm. But it was the conversation that followed which truly sealed their fates. "We have to be more careful," Gwendolyn purred, running a perfectly manicured nail down Greg's bare chest. "Marlena's already getting suspicious." Greg let out a derisive snort. "Let her suspect all she wants. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late." My grip tightened on the computer, knuckles straining white. Too late for what? As if reading my mind, Gwendolyn continued, "You're sure you can pull strings to get me that promotion over her? I'd hate for all this." She gestured between them with a salacious grin. "To be for nothing." "Consider it done," Greg replied with an arrogant smirk, pulling her closer. "Marlena's been living on borrowed time at that company. Once I tarnish her reputation, they'll have no choice but to overlook her for the job." White-hot fury blazed through me as the harsh reality crystallized. This wasn't just about broken vows. It was a calculated scheme to sabotage my career, my livelihood. To take everything I'd worked so hard to build and grind it into the dirt. In that moment, the floodgates burst open, unleashing a torrent of rage and betrayal unlike anything I'd ever felt. How could he? After everything we'd been through, everything I'd sacrificed to build this life with him? I wanted to scream, to hurl the laptop across the room until it shattered into a million pieces. But I couldn't, not yet. No, I needed to stay in control, to approach this strategically, like the clinical professional I was trained to be. Only then could I extract the revenge they so richly deserved. With a deep, steadying breath, I closed the laptop and began pacing, my mind already whirring with potential scenarios. I could take the evidence to the company, effectively torpedoing Greg's plans to undermine me. But that felt too impersonal, too corporate and detached. No, I needed a more visceral form of retribution. A public humiliation that would cut to the core of their arrogance and leave them disgraced, their reputations in tatters. A slow, wicked smile curved my lips as the perfect plan took shape. I would let them have their little dinner date, let them revel in their perceived victory, only to pull the rug out from under them in the most brutal, comprehensive way possible. Yes, Greg and Gwendolyn would get their comeuppance, all right, and by the time I was through with them, they'd be lucky if the ashes of their shattered lives were enough to fill a teacup. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began making arrangements, the gears of my meticulously crafted revenge already in motion. They wanted to play dirty? Fine by me. This was war, and I didn't intend to take any prisoners. The annual company gala was in full swing, a glittering affair filled with the city's social elite. Greg and Gwendolyn swept in like royalty, reveling in their perceived victory over me. Little did they know, I had a few surprises in store. As the evening progressed, I bided my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, as Gwendolyn took the stage to accept her undeserved promotion, I made my move. Before we proceed, I called out, my voice ringing clear across the hushed ballroom. All eyes turned towards me, but I kept my gaze locked on the stunned expressions of my traitorous husband and his mistress. I'm afraid there's been a terrible mistake, I continued, striding forward with purpose. You see, this promotion was meant for me until certain individuals conspired to undermine my reputation through lies and deceit. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd as I produced the sleek remote control, thumbing the button to project the incriminating footage onto the massive screen behind me. Greg and Gwendolyn's illicit affair played out in lurid detail, their hushed conversation about sabotaging my career echoing through the suddenly silent room. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the captive audience, my husband thought he could have his cake and eat it too, carrying on an affair while plotting to destroy my professional life in the process. I fixed my glare on Greg, who had gone deathly pale. Did you really think you could get away with it? That I'd just roll over and let you trample all over me? Before he could respond, I rounded on Gwendolyn, who looked fit to faint. And you were always jealous, weren't you? Petty and small, lashing out at anyone who dared outshine your fragile ego. With each biting word, I advanced on the pair until I stood mere feet away, reveling in their abject humiliation. Well, no more, I declared, my voice hardening to steel. This is where your manipulation ends. Turning back to Greg, I let the weight of his betrayal crash over me one final time. You have a choice, Greg. Resign, effective immediately, or I take this evidence to the authorities and pursue charges for corporate sabotage, fraud, you name it. His mouth worked soundlessly, the arrogant bravado he usually cloaked himself in shredded to tattered remnants. Well? I pressed, quirking an expectant brow. What's it going to be? In that moment, it was as if all the fight, all the pompous disdain, drained out of him, leaving a hollowed husk in its wake. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I'll resign, he muttered, unable to meet my gaze. A hushed gasp rippled through the crowd as I allowed myself a grim smile of satisfaction. With those 3 words, the power had shifted irrevocably, and he knew it. As security led the disgraced pair away, the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Well-wishers and colleagues swarmed around me, offering congratulations and commendations for my integrity. But I brushed them all aside, focusing on a single thought: justice, finally served. And it tasted sweeter than I could have ever imagined. The gala's afterglow still lingered as the crowd thinned out, leaving only a smattering of revelers. I stood off to the side, savoring a well-earned glass of celebratory champagne. Marlena? The familiar voice made me turn to find my boss, Jonathan, regarding me with a mixture of awe and respect. I can't begin to express how impressed I am by the way you handled this situation. I offered him a gracious nod, the bitterness of Greg's betrayal finally starting to ebb. I only did what was necessary to protect the company's integrity. Jonathan shook his head firmly. It was more than that. It was an incredible show of character and resilience in the face of such underhanded tactics. His gaze turned solemn. I'm deeply sorry you had to endure such a violation of trust from someone you loved. The words hung heavy in the air, raw emotion welling up. But I swallowed it down, lifting my chin. Thank you. But that's all in the past now. I managed a small smile. I'm just glad the truth finally came to light. As are we all, Jonathan agreed with feeling, which is why I wanted you to be the first to know. The leadership position is yours if you'll accept it. You've more than proven your mettle. A surprised breath escaped me as the implication sank in. After everything, I was being rewarded with the very promotion that Snake Gwendolyn had schemed so ruthlessly to steal. Poetic justice indeed. I thank you, Jonathan, I replied, equal parts humbled and elated. You can count on me to give my full dedication to this new role. A smattering of cheers and applause broke out as word spread, a small crowd gathering to offer their congratulations. I accepted them all with as much grace as I could muster, still reeling slightly from the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Eventually, the well-wishers dispersed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As my gaze swept over the opulent ballroom, now devoid of its glamorous trappings, a profound sense of closure washed over me. This chapter of my life, the one marred by Greg's poisonous deception, was officially closed, and a new one beckoned, brimming with hard-earned promise and the respect of my peers. Perhaps for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed the tension to bleed from my shoulders, exhaling a deep, cleansing breath. Greg and his tawdry schemes held no power over me anymore. I was free. As for what lay ahead, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, I would greet it head-on, bolstered by an unshakable self-belief forged in the fires of sweet, well-deserved revenge. Yes, the future was looking brighter than ever, and I had every intention of basking in its warm, liberating glow. A few months later, I settled into the plush leather chair behind my new desk, surveying my freshly appointed office with a contented smile. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of settling into my hard-won leadership role, but the swirl of activity was an invigorating change of pace, one I welcomed with open arms. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. "Come in." Mira poked her head in, beaming. "Hey you, got a second?" "For you, always." I waved her inside. "What's up?" "Oh, not much," she said airily, sliding into the chair across from me. "Just thought I'd pop in and see how the big boss lady is adjusting to life at the top." I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. "Please, it's not that grand. Just a new set of challenges, that's all." "Uh-huh, and I'm sure you're tackling them all with your usual flair." Mira's expression turned serious. "Honestly, Marlena, I'm really proud of you for how you handled that whole mess with Greg. You could have easily crumbled, but instead you rose up stronger than ever." My chest swelled with a mixture of pride and humility. Coming from someone like Mira, whose friendship and support had been utterly invaluable these past months, the words carried profound weight. "Thank you," I replied simply, holding her gaze. "I couldn't have done it without you, and the other amazing women in my life who had my back." Mira nodded, seemingly satisfied before that familiar mischievous glint returned to her eye. "So, now that you're all professional and important, does this mean you'll be too busy for us regular folk?" I barked out a laugh. "Get out of here with that. You know you're stuck with me." "Good," she grinned, "because I wouldn't have it any other way. We celebratory drinks tonight? My treat?" "You're on," I agreed with a smile, already feeling the burdens of the day melting away at the prospect of an evening of laughter and commiseration with my closest friend. As Mira excused herself, I leaned back in my chair, basking in the quiet satisfaction of a life and career finally back on track. Greg's betrayal still stung, that much was undeniable, but the ache had faded into a dull throb, easier to compartmentalize with each passing day. A faint buzzing from my computer caught my attention, a news alert with Greg's name in the headline. I clicked through, unsurprised to find it was another sordid account of his continued downward spiral in the aftermath of our very public, very messy split. Gwendolyn's name featured prominently as well, cementing her role as his partner in undoing. According to the reports, she'd relocated to someplace far away, her misguided ambition to take what wasn't hers, ultimately her own undoing. I exhaled a soft snort, shaking my head. Let them wallow in the squalor of their self-made misery. As for me, I was too busy thriving to spare them a second thought. A memo caught my eye, reminding me of the upcoming mentorship program orientation. I felt a swell of pride coursing through me. Nurturing the next generation, passing along the hard-won wisdom I'd accrued over the years. It was an honor and responsibility I didn't take lightly. Who knew? Maybe by paying it forward, I could help spare a few bright young minds from falling into the same traps I once had. If my own trials and tribulations could serve as a cautionary tale, a message of perseverance against all odds, then it would have all been worth it. Yes, this was the start of an incredible new chapter, I mused, energized by the possibilities that lay ahead. One forged through the flames of heartbreak and betrayal, certainly, but also one tempered by the resilience that had seen me through to the other side. And as I closed my eyes and drew a grounding breath, I silently vowed to conduct myself with the same integrity and purpose that had been my saving grace all along. No matter what storms may come, I would face them head-on and emerge victorious. This, I could finally say with conviction, was only the beginning. The phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, shattering the tranquil silence of the night. Olivia groaned, squinting at the caller ID in the dim glow. "Dad, what's wrong?" The sound of her father's trembling voice instantly jolted her awake. "Olivia, there's something off about Nico. I can feel it in my bones." Nico. The name sent a chill down her spine. Aaron's fiancé, the supposed perfect match their family had embraced. "What do you mean, Dad? Did something happen?" No. Martin sighed, the weight of his concerns palpable. "It's just a gut feeling, but it's eating me up inside, kiddo." Olivia pinched the bridge of her nose, her father's words echoing in her mind. Mere instinct wasn't enough to condemn a man, but she knew better than to dismiss Martin's intuition outright. "I'll look into it, Dad. Don't worry." The call ended, but Olivia found no solace in the silence that followed. The nagging seed of doubt had been planted, its roots digging deeper with every passing second. She had to know the truth, for her family's sake. Aaron's elated voice replayed in her mind from their last conversation. "He's just perfect, Olivia. You'll see." But would she? Olivia tossed and turned, her thoughts a tangled web of uncertainty. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, Olivia made a decision. She booked a flight to Denver, her hometown, determined to observe Nico firsthand and unravel the mysteries surrounding her sister's fiancé. The familiar sights and sounds of Denver greeted her like an embrace from an old friend. Yet, beneath the comforting familiarity, a sense of unease lingered. Olivia steeled herself, knowing that the path ahead would be anything but easy. The family gathering that evening was a whirlwind of laughter and chatter, but Olivia's focus remained fixed on Nico. Every word, every gesture, was scrutinized, her analytical mind searching for the slightest inconsistency. Nico regaled the table with tales of his business exploits, his charisma captivating the room. "I've handled bigger deals than this back in my days in Chicago," he boasted, a hint of arrogance seeping through. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, a discordant note in the symphony of his storytelling. The more she observed, the more her suspicions grew, fueled by her father's unwavering instinct. As the night drew to a close, Olivia found herself in the backyard, her mind a whirlwind of doubts and questions. The cool night air did little to quell the burning determination within her. She would get to the bottom of this, no matter the cost. The following morning, I found myself meandering through the familiar streets of my hometown, Denver. Each step stirred up a whirlwind of memories, both cherished and bittersweet. But today, my purpose transcended mere nostalgia. I was on a mission to unravel the truth about Nico. As I approached the quaint family diner, a wave of comforting familiarity washed over me. The bell chimed cheerfully as I stepped inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and buttery pancakes filling the air. In the corner booth, a familiar figure waved me over, her face beaming with excitement. "Olivia!" Aaron exclaimed, enveloping me in a warm embrace. "I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait for you to meet Nico." I forced a smile, pushing aside the lingering doubts that gnawed at my conscience. "I can't wait either," I lied, silently vowing to keep an open mind. As if on cue, a tall, well-groomed man appeared, his smile as polished as his appearance. "You must be Olivia," he said, extending his hand. "Aaron hasn't stopped talking about you." I studied his face, searching for any hint of deception, but found none. His easy charm and charisma were undeniable, making it easy to understand why Aaron had fallen so deeply for him. "It's great to finally meet you, Nico," I replied, my voice betraying none of the suspicion that simmered beneath the surface. Over the course of our breakfast, Nico regaled us with tales of his business ventures, each story more impressive than the last. Erin hung on to every word, her eyes shining with adoration. "He's just perfect, Olivia," she gushed, oblivious to the subtle inconsistencies that caught my attention. "I've never been happier." I nodded, forcing another smile as Nico's gaze met mine. In that fleeting moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something sinister lurking behind his charming facade. As we parted ways, Erin wrapped her arms around me, her joy palpable. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. "This means the world to me." I hugged her back, my heart heavy with the weight of the doubts that threatened to shatter her happiness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, a feeling that only grew stronger with each passing moment. That night, as I lay awake in the familiar comfort of my childhood bedroom, my mind raced with unanswered questions. Was I simply being paranoid, or was there truly something darker lurking beneath Nico's polished exterior? One thing was certain, I wouldn't rest until I had uncovered the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For Erin's sake, and for the sake of our family, I had to know. The family dinner was a lively affair, with laughter and conversation flowing as freely as the wine. But beneath the jovial atmosphere, an undercurrent of tension simmered, fueled by my growing suspicions about Nico. As the meal progressed, I found myself scrutinizing his every move, searching for any hint of deception. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself. It all seemed too polished, too carefully crafted. "So, Nico," my father began, his voice cutting through the chatter, "Erin tells us you have quite the impressive business background." Nico's smile didn't falter as he launched into another tale of his supposed exploits. "Absolutely, Martin. I've handled bigger deals than this back in my days in Chicago." I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes darted ever so slightly, as if he were gauging our reactions. A flicker of unease rippled through me, but I remained silent, determined to observe and gather as much information as possible. As the evening wore on, the cracks in Nico's facade became more apparent. His stories didn't quite add up, and his responses to certain questions seemed rehearsed, almost too perfect. It was during a lull in the conversation that I seized my opportunity. "So, Nico," I began, my voice calm but laced with intention, "how did you and Erin first meet?" A brief pause, a millisecond too long, before he responded. "It was at a charity event in the city," he said smoothly. "Love at first sight, you could say." But something in his tone didn't sit right with me. There was a hollowness to his words, a disconnect that set off alarm bells in my mind. As the night drew to a close, I found myself alone in the backyard, desperately needing a moment of solitude to process everything I had observed. The cool night air did little to quell the storm of emotions raging within me. Lost in thought, I nearly jumped out of my skin when a familiar voice cut through the silence. "Penny for your thoughts, sis." I turned to find Erin standing there, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "It's nothing," I lied, forcing a smile, "just processing everything." Erin's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might press further. But then, her features softened, and she enveloped me in a warm embrace. "I'm so glad you're here," she murmured. "It means everything to me that you're a part of this." As I hugged her back, a wave of guilt washed over me. How could I shatter her happiness with my doubts and suspicions? Yet the nagging feeling that something wasn't right continued to gnaw at me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. As we parted ways, I caught one last glimpse of Nico through the kitchen window. He was on the phone, his back turned, but there was something about the way he carried himself that sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I knew I couldn't let this go. For better or worse, I had to uncover the truth, no matter where it led or how painful it might be. The nagging doubt had taken root, festering in the back of my mind like a malignant growth. I knew I couldn't shake this feeling until I uncovered the truth about Nico, no matter how unpleasant it might be. With a steely resolve, I turned to the one resource I knew could shed light on his past, the internet. Hours melted away as I scoured through public records, my fingers flying across the keyboard with feverish determination. At first, the results were innocuous. A few mentions of business deals, a charitable donation here and there. But then, buried beneath layers of seemingly benign information, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Court records, detailing a string of fraudulent activities and legal battles, all linked to an alias that matched Nico's description. The details were damning: forgery, embezzlement, and a web of deceit that spanned years. My heart pounded in my chest as I printed out the documents, the weight of the evidence nearly suffocating me. This was it. The proof I had been searching for, the confirmation that my instincts had been right all along. But even as relief washed over me, a new wave of dread took its place. How could I confront Nico with this information? And more importantly, how could I break the news to Aaron, whose world would undoubtedly come crashing down? The decision was made for me when later that evening I overheard a hushed conversation between Nico and Aaron in the kitchen. "Make sure your old man doesn't poke around too much," Nico's voice hissed, laced with a venom I had never heard before. My blood ran cold, and I knew in that moment that I had to act, for Aaron's sake and for the safety of our entire family. Without hesitation, I dialed the one number I knew I could trust. Dean, my childhood friend who had become a respected detective in the local police force. "Dean, it's Olivia," I whispered urgently into the phone. "I need your help. I've uncovered something about Nico, and it's not good." There was a pause on the other end, and then Dean's voice, steady and reassuring. "Tell me everything." Over the next hour, I laid out the damning evidence I had uncovered, my words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and determination. Dean listened intently, his silence punctuated only by the occasional question or murmur of concern. "We've seen his type before," Dean finally said, his voice grave. "Let's tread carefully, but prepare for the worst." As I hung up the phone, a sense of relief washed over me. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. With Dean by my side, I knew we stood a chance of exposing Nico's true nature before it was too late. But even as I steeled myself for the battle ahead, a part of me couldn't help but mourn for the innocence that was about to be shattered. Aaron's world was about to be turned upside down, and there was nothing I could do to soften the blow. All I could do was hope that, in the end, the truth would set us all free, no matter how painful it might be. With Dean on board, I felt a renewed sense of determination coursing through my veins. No longer was I fighting this battle alone. I had an ally, someone I could trust implicitly. We met the next day at a nondescript diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where conversations could happen unnoticed. Dean slid into the booth across from me, his expression grim. "I've been digging into Nico's past," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "and let's just say your instincts were spot on." I flipped open the file, my eyes widening as I took in the damning evidence Dean had uncovered. Financial records, witness statements, even surveillance photos. It was all there, painting a picture of a man who had made a career out of deception and fraud. "How did you get all this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dean's lips curled into a tight smile. "Let's just say I have my ways." As I pored over the documents, a sickening realization washed over me. Nico was no ordinary con man. He was a master manipulator, a predator who had left a trail of broken lives and shattered dreams in his wake. "We have to stop him," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and determination, "before he does the same thing to Aaron and our family." Dean nodded solemnly. "Don't worry, we'll put an end to this, but we have to be smart about it. Guys like Nico are slippery. We can't give him any chance to slip away." Over the next few days, Dean and I formulated a plan, meticulously laying the groundwork for Nico's downfall. We knew we had to tread carefully, gathering as much evidence as possible before making our move. As the pre-wedding festivities kicked into high gear, I found myself playing the role of the supportive sister, all the while keeping a watchful eye on Nico's every move. It was a delicate balancing act, one that tested the limits of my resolve. But through it all, one thought kept me going. The knowledge that I was doing this for Aaron, to protect her from the devastating consequences of Nico's deceit. Finally, the night of the rehearsal dinner arrived, and I knew our moment had come. As the guests mingled and laughter filled the air, I caught Dean's eye from across the room. With a slight nod, he slipped away, setting our plan in motion. Minutes later, the sound of commotion from the hallway cut through the revelry. Nico's face drained of color as Dean strode into the room, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Nico Delgado," Dean's voice boomed, his expression one of grim satisfaction. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and a slew of other charges. The charade ends today." Time seemed to slow as Nico's true nature was laid bare for all to see. Erin's anguished cries pierced the stunned silence, her world crumbling around her. As the officers led Nico away in handcuffs, I could see the hatred burning in his eyes, a hatred directed squarely at me. But in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing, no matter the personal cost. Because in the end, the truth was all that mattered, and Nico's web of lies had finally been unraveled, once and for all. The days following Nico's arrest were a whirlwind of chaos and heartbreak. Erin, consumed by a grief so raw and visceral, retreated into a shell of silence, unable to process the betrayal that had shattered her world. As for me, I found myself caught between a sense of relief and a nagging guilt. While I knew I had done the right thing in exposing Nico's true nature, the sight of my sister's anguish was almost too much to bear. It was during one of the pre-wedding parties, a lavish affair that now felt like a hollow mockery, that I found myself face to face with the man who had orchestrated this deceit. Nico stood alone, his once charming demeanor replaced by a cold, calculating stare. As our eyes met, a shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to back down. "Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "I should have known you'd be the one to stick your nose where it didn't belong." I steeled myself, refusing to let his words rattle me. "Cut the act, Nico. It's over." A mirthless chuckle escaped his lips. "Oh, it's far from over. You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Before I could respond, he leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "I'll make sure you regret this, one way or another." A wave of revulsion washed over me, and I recoiled, my fists clenched at my sides. "Is that a threat?" Nico's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a contemptuous sneer. "Call it whatever you want, but mark my words, you haven't seen the last of me." With that, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me shaken and seething with anger. As the party raged on around me, I found myself seeking solace in the quiet of the gardens, desperate for a moment of respite from the chaos that had consumed my life. It was there, amidst the fragrant blooms, that Dean found me, his expression etched with concern. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low and reassuring. I let out a long sigh, the weight of Nico's threats still lingering. "I'm fine, just rattled, I guess." Dean's brow furrowed. "What did he say to you?" Reluctantly, I recounted the encounter, my words tinged with a hint of fear that I couldn't quite shake. To my surprise, Dean's expression hardened, his jaw clenched with determination. "That son of a bitch," he growled. "Don't worry, Olivia. He's not getting away with this." I nodded, grateful for Dean's unwavering support. "I know, but what if he's right? What if this is just the beginning?" Dean placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Then we'll be ready. We've got the law on our side, and we're not backing down. Not now, not ever." As I gazed into his resolute eyes, I felt a surge of strength wash over me. Nico's threats were hollow. He was a cornered animal, lashing out in desperation, and I would be damned if I let him win. From that moment on, a newfound determination took hold. I may have exposed Nico's deceit, but the battle was far from over. He had threatened my family, my very way of life, and I would stop at nothing to ensure he paid for his crimes. As the party drew to a close, I caught a glimpse of Erin, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. In that moment, I vowed to myself that I would do whatever it took to protect her, to shield her from the fallout of Nico's actions. Because in the end, family was all that mattered, and I would fight like hell to keep ours intact, no matter the cost. The day of the wedding rehearsal dawned like a harbinger of reckoning. As I stepped into the ornate church, the weight of the past few weeks bore down upon me, threatening to crush me beneath its weight. Erin sat in the front pew, her eyes hollow and lifeless, a mere shadow of the vibrant woman I had known. My heart ached for her, for the dreams she had so foolishly pinned on a man who had proven himself to be nothing more than a master of deception. As the rehearsal began, I found myself scanning the crowd, searching for any sign of Nico. Part of me hoped he would have the audacity to show his face, to give me the chance to confront him one last time. But he was nowhere to be seen, and for a fleeting moment I wondered if perhaps he had simply cut his losses and fled. That notion was swiftly dispelled when Dean caught my eye from the back of the church, his expression grave. With a barely perceptible nod, he slipped out of the side door, his movements purposeful and determined. My heart raced as the minutes ticked by, the rehearsal proceeding in a haze of artificial smiles and forced pleasantries. Just when I thought I could bear the tension no longer, the sound of commotion from the vestibule shattered the fragile illusion. All eyes turned as Dean strode back into the church, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. In their grasp, a bedraggled and defiant Nico struggled against his restraints, his once polished veneer now cracked and peeling away. "Nico Delgado," Dean's voice boomed, echoing through the sanctum like a thunderclap. "You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and a slew of other charges. The charade ends today." Time seemed to slow as the words hung in the air, their weight pressing down upon us all. Erin let out a guttural wail, her anguish reverberating through the church like a physical force. Nico, for his part, fixed me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," he spat, his words laced with venom. "You did this. You'll pay for this, you bitch!" Before I could react, Dean was upon him, wrenching him back with a savage force. "That's enough out of you," he growled, his grip unwavering. As the officers led Nico away, his threats and curses echoing through the halls, a deafening silence descended upon the church. All eyes turned to me, a kaleidoscope of emotions playing across their faces: shock, relief, and in the case of my father, grudging respect. It was Erin's gaze that cut deepest, though. Her eyes, once so full of love and joy, now burned with a betrayal so profound it threatened to consume us both. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained anguish. "He was my everything." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? That I had done what was necessary to protect her, to shield her from a life of lies and heartbreak? In the end, I said nothing. There were no words that could salve the wound I had inflicted, no platitudes that could undo the damage wrought by Nico's deceit. As the church emptied, the echoes of Erin's sobs lingering in the air, I found myself alone with my thoughts, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions swirling within me. I had won, that much was certain. But at what cost? The collateral damage was immeasurable, and I couldn't help but wonder if the price had been too high. Yet, as I gazed up at the towering stained glass windows, their kaleidoscopic hues casting a warm glow across my face, I knew in my heart that I had done the right thing. Nico's web of lies had been unraveled, his reign of terror brought to an end, and as painful as the consequences might be, at least now we could begin to heal. The aftermath of Nico's exposure was a whirlwind of emotions, each day bringing a new set of challenges and revelations. As the true extent of his deceit came to light, our family found itself navigating the treacherous waters of betrayal and heartbreak. Erin, once the embodiment of joy and laughter, retreated into a shell of grief and anguish. Her world had been shattered, her dreams reduced to ashes by the man she had loved and trusted. I ached to comfort her, to soothe the wounds inflicted by Nico's lies, but words seemed inadequate in the face of such profound pain. Dad, ever the stoic pillar of strength, struggled to mask his own turmoil. The guilt of having doubted his instincts weighed heavily upon him, a burden he carried in silence. It was only in the quiet moments when his guard was down that I glimpsed the depth of his remorse. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that I had done the right thing, no matter how arduous the path had been. Nico's reign of deception had come to an end, and while the cost had been steep, at least now we could begin to rebuild our lives on a foundation of truth. It was during one of those rare, quiet evenings that Dad sought me out, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "Olivia," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology." I shook my head, waving off his words. "Dad, you don't have to." He held up a hand, silencing me with a gentle yet firm gesture. "No, I do. I was blind, kiddo. Blinded by my own desire to see Erin happy, to the point where I ignored the warning signs right in front of me." A heavy silence hung between us, the weight of his words settling like a physical presence. "You saved us, my girl," he continued, reaching out to take my hand in his calloused grip. "If it weren't for your vigilance, your unwavering determination to uncover the truth, who knows what depths Nico's deceit might have reached." Tears welled in my eyes as I squeezed his hand, a lifetime of unspoken emotions passing between us in that moment. "I did what any sister would do, Dad. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Aaron's happiness means everything to me. Dad's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and relief. I know, kiddo, and that's what makes you so special. In the weeks that followed, the process of healing began in earnest. Erin, slowly but surely, emerged from the depths of her despair, her spirit battered but unbroken. With the unwavering support of our family, she found the strength to pick up the pieces and start anew. And as for Nico, his day of reckoning finally came. The weight of the evidence, coupled with the tenacity of Dean and the legal system, ensured that he would face the consequences of his actions. Though the scars of his betrayal would linger, at least now we could find solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. As I stood on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in a kaleidoscope of colors, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us to this point. It had been a harrowing path, fraught with pain and heartbreak, but in the end, we had emerged stronger, our bonds forged anew in the crucible of adversity. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, I made a silent vow to never again let doubt or deception darken our doorstep, to protect the sanctity of our family with every fiber of my being. For in the end, that was the true victory. The knowledge that no matter what life threw our way, we would face it together, united in our unwavering love and resilience. Isn't marriage about time together, Hudson? Or does your new promotion mean our vows expire at midnight? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing unease in my stomach. Hudson glanced up from his laptop, his brow furrowed. Carice, you know it's just a busy period at work. This promotion is a big deal, and I need to prove myself. By neglecting your wife? I countered, feeling the sting of his absence more acutely with each passing day. We barely see each other anymore, and when we do, you're glued to that screen. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm sorry, honey. It won't be like this forever. Once I get through this initial phase, things will settle down. I promise. I wanted to believe him, but the nagging doubts persisted. Hudson had always been ambitious, but his recent detachment felt different, more pronounced. A part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play. All right, I conceded, forcing a small smile. But don't forget about us, okay? We're supposed to be a team. He reached out and squeezed my hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. You're right. I'll make it up to you, I swear. As I gazed into his eyes, searching for the reassurance I craved, a flicker of uncertainty remained. Was I overthinking things, or was my husband slowly slipping away, consumed by forces beyond my comprehension? The next evening, I found myself at one of Hudson's company parties, surrounded by the usual suspects, colleagues, investors, and their respective partners. I plastered on a smile, making small talk while scanning the room for Hudson. That's when I overheard a hushed conversation between two women I recognized from previous events. Did you hear about Hudson's little rendezvous with Janine? Apparently, they've been getting cozy lately. My heart skipped a beat as the implications sank in. Janine was one of Hudson's direct reports, a young, ambitious woman always eager to please. You're kidding, the other woman gasped. But what about his wife? The first woman shrugged. I guess the thrill of the promotion was too much to resist. My world tilted on its axis as their words burrowed deep, fueling a suspicion I had desperately tried to ignore. Was Hudson really capable of such betrayal? In that moment, I knew I couldn't blindly trust his reassurances any longer. If there was truth to the rumors, I needed to uncover it, no matter how painful the revelations might be. After the party, I found myself unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had taken root. The rumor about Hudson's potential infidelity gnawed at me, breeding doubts that threatened to consume my every waking thought. I needed answers, but confronting Hudson directly could backfire spectacularly if my fears proved unfounded. No, I needed a more discreet approach, someone on the inside who could shed light on the situation without arousing suspicion. That's when I remembered Olivia, an old friend from college who had landed a job at the same tech firm a few years back. We hadn't spoken much lately, our lives having drifted apart, but perhaps she could provide the insight I so desperately craved. I sent her a casual text, suggesting we catch up over coffee, and to my relief, she eagerly agreed. A few days later, we found ourselves seated at a cozy cafe reminiscing about old times. "It's been too long," Olivia remarked, sipping her latte. "How have you been? How's Hudson?" I forced a smile, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been concerned lately." Olivia's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted the rumors I'd overheard at the party, my voice wavering ever so slightly. There were whispers about Hudson being involved with someone named Janine. "Do you know anything about that?" Olivia's eyes widened, and she glanced around furtively before leaning in closer. "Carice, I'm so sorry, but those rumors, they might have some truth to them." My heart sank as her words washed over me, confirming my worst fears. "What do you know?" I pressed, needing every detail, no matter how excruciating. "Janine and Hudson have been spending a lot of time together lately, working late nights and attending client meetings alone," Olivia explained, her voice laced with sympathy. "People have seen them getting a little too close for comfort, if you know what I mean." I nodded, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill forth. "And his promotion? Was any of that earned legitimately?" Olivia hesitated, her expression grave. "From what I've heard, he may have cut some corners, played a few underhanded games to get ahead, but I don't know all the details." In that moment, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me, fueled by the realization that the man I had devoted myself to was capable of such deceit. Hudson had not only broken our sacred vows, but had also compromised his integrity for personal gain. "Thank you for being honest with me," I managed, my voice trembling. I need to process all this." Olivia reached across the table, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "I'm here for you, Carice. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back." As I left the cafe, my mind whirled with a torrent of emotions: disbelief, rage, and a burning desire for retribution. Hudson had shattered the trust that formed the bedrock of our marriage, and for that, he would face consequences. I knew then that I couldn't simply confront him directly. He would undoubtedly deny everything and attempt to gaslight me. No, I needed a more strategic approach, what would expose his misdeeds beyond any doubt and bring his carefully constructed facade crumbling down around him. And I knew just the person who could help me orchestrate my revenge. After my conversation with Olivia, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for justice. Hudson's betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined, and the thought of him carrying on his deceitful ways filled me with a rage I had never known before. I needed a plan, a way to gather irrefutable evidence of his misdeeds and expose him for the fraud he truly was. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone who could help me navigate the treacherous waters ahead. That's when I reached out to my brother, Grant. We had always been close, and I knew I could trust him implicitly. When I explained the situation, his reaction was one of shock and fury. "That son of a bitch," Grant growled, his fists clenched. "How dare he do this to you, Carice? You don't deserve any of this." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know, but I need your help to make things right. I can't let him get away with this." Grant's expression hardened, his eyes burning with determination. "Whatever you need, sis. I'm with you every step of the way." Over the next few weeks, Grant and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of Hudson's duplicity. Olivia provided us with insider information, helping us piece together the puzzle of his deceit. We uncovered incriminating emails, financial records, and even photographic evidence of Hudson's affair with Janine. The more we dug, the clearer it became that his promotion was built on a foundation of lies and underhanded tactics. "Look at this," Grant exclaimed one night, thrusting a stack of documents in my face. "He falsified expense reports, embezzled funds from the company. This guy is a criminal, Carice." I felt sick to my stomach as I pored over the damning evidence, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. Finally, I had the ammunition I needed to bring Hudson's world crashing down around him. As the days passed, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger and hurt warred with a lingering sense of love for the man I had once vowed to cherish. But his actions had shattered that bond, and I knew there was no turning back. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Grant asked one evening, his voice laced with concern. "This is going to get ugly, Carice? Are you prepared for the fallout?" I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. He made his choices, Grant, and now it's time for him to face the consequences. The plan was set in motion, and there was no turning back. Hudson had sown the seeds of his own destruction, and I was determined to reap the bitter harvest. A part of me still held out hope that he might come clean, that he might show some semblance of remorse and save what little was left of our fractured relationship. But deep down, I knew better. As I waited for the perfect moment to strike, to unleash the storm of retribution upon my unsuspecting husband, I couldn't help but wonder if a part of me had been irrevocably changed. The betrayal had left scars, hardening my heart and fueling a thirst for vengeance that terrified me. But there was no going back now. Hudson had made his choices, and it was time for him to face the consequences, no matter how ugly or painful they might be. With Grant's unwavering support and Olivia's insider knowledge, our mission to gather evidence against Hudson intensified. We were like detectives on a case, leaving no stone unturned in our quest to expose his web of lies. Grant had connections in the tech industry, and he leveraged them to gain access to confidential records and communications. Late nights were spent poring over financial statements, email threads, and surveillance footage, piecing together the intricate puzzle of Hudson's deception. "Look at this," Grant said one evening, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "He's been siphoning funds from the company into offshore accounts for months." I felt a sickening twist in my gut as the realization sank in. Not only had Hudson betrayed our marriage vows, but he had also compromised his integrity and broken the law in pursuit of his ambitions. "That bastard," I muttered through gritted teeth. "He's going to pay for this, Grant. I swear it." Grant's expression hardened, his jaw set in determination. "We'll make sure of it, sis. He won't get away with this." As the days passed, the evidence mounted, painting a damning portrait of Hudson's misdeeds. Illicit affairs, financial fraud, insider trading. It seemed there was no line he wasn't willing to cross in his pursuit of power and success. And yet, despite the overwhelming proof of his wrongdoing, a part of me still held out a glimmer of hope that perhaps, deep down, there was some justification for his actions, some explanation that could somehow make sense of the chaos he had unleashed upon our lives. But every time I entertained that notion, the memories of his lies and betrayal came flooding back, extinguishing any lingering sympathy I might have harbored. "He's a monster, Carys," Grant said one night, his voice thick with disgust. "A selfish, lying monster who doesn't deserve a shred of your compassion." I knew he was right, but still, a part of me struggled with the weight of the decision that lay ahead. To expose Hudson's misdeeds would be to set in motion a series of events that could very well destroy him, professionally, financially, and perhaps even legally. Was I prepared to go that far? To unleash a storm of retribution that could potentially consume not only him, but also those caught in its wake? As I wrestled with these questions, Grant's voice cut through my thoughts. "Carys, look at me." I met his gaze, drawn in by the intensity in his eyes. "You didn't ask for any of this," he continued. "Hudson made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences. Don't let your compassion blind you to the reality of what he's done." His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I had been grappling with for too long. Hudson had brought this upon himself, and it was time for me to stop making excuses for his inexcusable actions. With renewed determination, I nodded, steeling my resolve. "You're right, Grant. It's time to end this, once and for all." The planning continued, each piece of evidence meticulously catalogued and organized, building an ironclad case against the man I'd once loved. As the final pieces fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet satisfaction. Hudson had chosen his path, and now it was time for me to choose mine, a path that would lead to the reckoning he so richly deserved. With the weight of Hudson's betrayal bearing down on me, I knew the time had come to confront him directly. I had to give him one last chance to come clean, to acknowledge the depth of his deceit, and perhaps salvage what little remained of our shattered relationship. Grant was adamant that I should proceed with caution, fearing Hudson's potential for volatility when backed into a corner. But I was resolute in my decision. I needed to look into his eyes and see if there was even a flicker of remorse, a glimmer of the man I had once loved. I arranged for us to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground where we could have a candid discussion away from prying eyes. As I sat waiting, my heart pounded in my chest, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within me. When Hudson finally arrived, his expression was one of confusion and mild annoyance. "What's this all about, Karis?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. "Hudson, we need to talk about what's been going on." He tensed, his body language defensive. "What do you mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder filled with the damning evidence we had gathered, emails, financial records, even photographs. "I know about the affairs, Hudson. I know about the fraud and the embezzlement." His eyes widened as he took in the stack of incriminating documents before him. For a moment he seemed caught off guard, but then his expression hardened and a cruel smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. "So, you've been doing a little digging, have you?" he sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "Bravo, Karis. Bravo." I felt my blood boil at his dismissive attitude, but I forced myself to remain calm. "This is your chance to come clean, Hudson, to tell the truth, and maybe, just maybe, salvage what's left of our marriage." He let out a harsh laugh, his eyes cold and utterly devoid of remorse. "Come clean? Why the hell would I do that? I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let a little thing like you ruin everything I've built." His words cut like a knife, laying bare the depths of his selfishness and depravity. In that moment, I realized that the man I had loved was gone, consumed by his own twisted ambition and greed. "You're a monster," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "A lying, cheating monster who doesn't deserve a shred of loyalty or love." Hudson leaned back in his seat, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Call me what you want, Karis, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who's going to come out on top. You think your little stunt here is going to stop me? Think again." As he rose to leave, he fixed me with a cold, calculating stare. "You had your chance to play nice, but you blew it. Now you're going to find out just how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." With those chilling words, he turned and strode out of the cafe, leaving me shaken to my core. In that moment, I knew that any lingering hope of reconciliation was gone, replaced by a burning desire to see Hudson pay for his crimes. The gloves were off and the battle lines had been drawn. Hudson had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. A choice that would either see me emerge victorious or be consumed by the fires of his wrath. As I sat there, clutching the damning evidence in my trembling hands, I realized that there was no turning back. The path ahead would be fraught with pain and retribution, but it was a journey I was prepared to undertake, no matter the cost. Hudson's downfall was inevitable, and I would be the one to orchestrate his demise, even if it meant sacrificing a part of my own soul in the process. After Hudson's defiant reaction and veiled threats, I knew there was no turning back. The time for diplomacy had passed, and the only path forward was to bring his misdeeds into the harsh light of day, exposing his carefully cultivated facade for the world to see. Grant and I meticulously planned our next move, scrutinizing every detail and anticipating every potential obstacle. We couldn't afford any missteps. This was our one chance to strike a decisive blow and ensure Hudson's downfall. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a major company event, a lavish gala attended by executives, investors, and industry bigwigs. It was the perfect stage for our grand unveiling, and we were determined to make it a spectacle Hudson would never forget. As the evening unfolded, I watched him work the room, charming and schmoozing his way through the crowd with practiced ease. It made my stomach churn to see him so effortlessly maintain his charade, all while the weight of his deceit threatened to crush him. When the time came for the speeches and presentations, I caught Grant's eye from across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, and I knew it was now or never. With my heart pounding in my chest, I made my way to the podium, clutching the folder containing the damning evidence against Hudson. The room fell silent as I took the stage, all eyes fixed upon me. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why I've interrupted this gala, but I assure you it's for a matter of grave importance." Hudson's face had drained of color, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. I fixed him with a steely gaze, determined to hold his attention as I methodically laid out the details of his misdeeds. For years, my husband Hudson has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and corruption, I declared, pulling out the first piece of evidence, a printout of an incriminating email exchange. He has been carrying on multiple affairs, including one with his direct report, Janine. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as I continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Financial fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. No stone was left unturned as I methodically dismantled Hudson's carefully constructed facade. Throughout it all, Hudson remained frozen in place, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. When I finally fell silent, the room was engulfed in a deafening silence, punctuated only by the occasional gasp or whispered exclamation. Then, Hudson found his voice. "You lying bitch," he snarled, his composure crumbling. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything I've built? You're delusional." But his protestations fell on deaf ears as I produced the final piece of evidence, a damning video recording that captured his misdeeds in vivid detail. As the footage played out on the massive screens flanking the stage, Hudson's face drained of color, and he sank back into his chair, utterly defeated. In that moment, I knew I had won. Hudson's carefully constructed empire had come crashing down around him, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the premises, his eyes met mine one final time, and I saw a flicker of something I hadn't expected: regret. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, the fallout was swift and severe. Hudson was promptly fired, and legal proceedings were soon underway, threatening to strip him of everything he had so ruthlessly acquired. As for me, I felt a strange sense of catharsis, tempered by a lingering sadness for the man I had once loved. But ultimately, I knew I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but for all those he had wronged in his relentless pursuit of power and success. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe a little easier, secure in the knowledge that justice had been served. In the aftermath of Hudson's public downfall, the wheels of justice continued to turn with relentless momentum. With the evidence I had painstakingly gathered, the authorities wasted no time in building a case against him, leaving him little choice but to face the consequences of his actions. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I found myself embroiled in another battle, the battle for our shared assets and the life we had built together. Hudson, desperate to salvage what little he could, fought tooth and nail to maintain control, but I was determined not to let him walk away unscathed. "He's going to try and bury you in paperwork and legal jargon," Grant warned me one afternoon as we strategized our next move. "But we've got the upper hand here, Carys. Don't let him intimidate you." With Grant's guidance and the support of a formidable legal team, I navigated the treacherous waters of the divorce proceedings, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontations with Hudson. True to form, he resorted to every dirty trick in the book, attempting to gaslight and manipulate me at every turn. "Carys, please," he pleaded during one particularly heated exchange. "You know I never meant to hurt you. It was all just a misunderstanding. We can work through this." I fixed him with a withering glare, utterly unmoved by his hollow words. "Save your breath, Hudson. The only thing I want from you is a fair settlement. Nothing more, nothing less." His facade crumbled, and the true depths of his rage and bitterness were laid bare. "You think you've won, don't you?" he snarled, his eyes burning with hatred. "Well, you're wrong. I'll make sure you pay for this, one way or another." But his threats rang hollow, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. With the weight of evidence stacked against him, Hudson had no choice but to accept the terms of the divorce, which stripped him of a significant portion of his ill-gotten wealth. As the final papers were signed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Hudson had been brought to his knees, his once towering ambitions reduced to rubble by his own hubris and deceit. In the weeks and months that followed, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with the unwavering support of Grant, Olivia, and those who had stood by me through the darkest of times. Hudson, on the other hand, found himself adrift, his professional and personal life in tatters, Whispers of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, making him a pariah in the very circles he had once coveted. On occasion he would reach out, his messages dripping with desperation and remorse. "Caris, please, you have to forgive me," he begged in one email. "I was a fool, and I've lost everything that matters. Give me one more chance, I'm begging you." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The wounds he had inflicted ran too deep, and the man I had once loved was little more than a distant memory, eclipsed by the monster he had become. As I forged ahead, building a new life on my own terms, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal, the pain, the burning desire for vengeance, it had all been a crucible, forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And while the scars of Hudson's deception would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged victorious, my integrity and self-worth intact. As for Hudson, he would forever be a cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. In the end, the sweet taste of retribution was tempered by a lingering bitterness, but I knew that I had done what was necessary to reclaim my life and my dignity, and for that I had no regrets. With divorce finalized and Hudson's machinations laid bare, I found myself at a crossroads. The life I had once known was gone, replaced by the harsh realities of his betrayal and the aftermath of my quest for vengeance. But even in the midst of the turmoil, a part of me refused to be defined by Hudson's actions. I was determined to forge a new path, one that would allow me to not only heal, but also to help others who found themselves in similar situations. That's when the opportunity to work with a local nonprofit organization focused on empowering women presented itself. It was a chance to take my own experiences and channel them into something positive, a way to ensure that no one would have to endure the pain and heartbreak I had faced alone. "This is perfect for you, Caris," Grant enthused when I shared the news. "You've been through hell, but now you can use that to help others find their strength." With his unwavering support and the encouragement of my close friends, I dove headfirst into the work, pouring my heart and soul into advocating for those who had been wronged, betrayed, and cast aside. It wasn't easy, of course. There were days when the memories of Hudson's deceit would come flooding back, threatening to overwhelm me with a tidal wave of anger and sadness. But each time I felt myself slipping, I found strength in the stories of the women I worked with, their resilience, their determination to rise above the ashes of their own shattered dreams. Through it all, I couldn't help but wonder about Hudson's own journey. Where had his fall from grace taken him? Was he still clinging to the delusions of grandeur that had fueled his downward spiral, or had the weight of his actions finally broken through his arrogance? The answers came in sporadic bursts, whispers, and rumors that filtered through the grapevine. He had been forced to downsize, selling off his lavish possessions and moving into a modest apartment. Job prospects were scarce, his reputation forever tarnished by the scandal he had brought upon himself. A part of me felt a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved, but that fleeting emotion was quickly eclipsed by a sense of justice. Hudson was finally reaping the consequences he had sown, a bitter harvest of his own making. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and with a renewed sense of purpose. The scars of Hudson's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had become a part of my narrative, a testament to the trials I had endured and overcome. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism and hope. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but I knew that I had the strength and the support system to navigate them, one step at a time. In the end, Hudson's legacy would be one of cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. But my story, I hoped, would be one of resilience, of rising from the ashes of betrayal and forging a new path, one that would inspire and empower others to find their own strength in the face of adversity. And as I looked back on the journey that had brought me to this point, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just for the justice I had served, but for the person I had become in the process. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead with a newfound sense of purpose and resolve. It was a typical evening in our middle-class neighborhood, but the hushed voices coming from the kitchen were anything but ordinary. As I passed by, the words my parents exchanged made me stop dead in my tracks. "It's just not feasible. With Kale's potential on the line, Rowan will be fine with her aunt." My heart sank as the realization hit me. They were discussing sending me away to live with my aunt while the family moved to further my younger brother's sports career. The sacrifices they were willing to make for Kale, at my expense, stung deeply. But what about my dreams? I wanted to scream, but the words never left my lips. Instead, I retreated to my room, a knot forming in my throat as I fought back tears of betrayal. The following days were a blur as my parents made the necessary arrangements. Their decision was final, and my protests fell on deaf ears. Kale's potential was their sole focus, leaving no room for my aspirations or desires. Within a week, I found myself in my aunt's modest apartment, surrounded by unfamiliar walls and a sense of displacement. While Aunt Marla tried her best to make me feel welcome, the ache of being cast aside lingered. As the weeks passed, the neglect I felt only intensified. Conversations were dominated by Kale's achievements, with Aunt Marla's dismissive comments like, "Just focus on your school, dear. Let's leave the spotlight for Kale." My talents and passions seemed to fade into insignificance, overshadowed by the glory bestowed upon my brother. But a tiny spark within me refused to be extinguished. It was during my school's literary club meetings that I found solace in the written word. The rhythmic flow of sentences and the power of storytelling ignited a fire within me, a fire that would soon blaze into an inferno of defiance. The modest apartment felt suffocating, a constant reminder of my diminished standing within the family. Even here, under Aunt Marla's roof, the shadow of Kale's success loomed large, obscuring any chance for me to shine. "Did you hear about Kale's latest tournament win?" Aunt Marla would gush, her eyes sparkling with pride as she recounted every detail. "He's on track to become a true champion." I forced a smile, swallowing the bitter resentment that threatened to spill out. It seemed no matter where I went, my brother's accomplishments overshadowed my own existence. School offered a temporary respite, a place where I could escape the constant comparisons and find solace in the written word. The literary club became my sanctuary, a haven where my talents were nurtured and celebrated. Mrs. Wilkins, the club's advisor, saw something in me that even my own family had overlooked. "Your writing has such depth and emotion," she would say, her gentle encouragement fueling my passion. As the weeks turned into months, my skills flourished, and I found myself pouring my heart and soul into every piece I crafted. The lines between fiction and reality blurred as I wove tales of neglect and resentment, channeling the turmoil that had become my constant companion. "Rowan, this is exceptional work," Mrs. Wilkins beamed one day, holding up a script I had written. "Have you considered submitting it to the state competition?" I hesitated, the familiar doubts creeping in. Would my family even care if I succeeded? Or would they simply brush it aside, as they had done countless times before? But something within me stirred, a burning desire to prove my worth, to step out from Kale's overwhelming shadow and claim my own spotlight. "I'll do it," I declared, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The weeks leading up to the competition were a blur of late nights and frantic revisions. I poured every ounce of my being into that script, infusing it with the raw emotions that had festered for far too long. When the results were announced, and my name echoed through the auditorium as the winner, I should have felt elated. But the hollow silence that greeted me upon returning home was deafening. "That's nice," Aunt Marla offered half-heartedly. "Anyway, did you hear Kale is now ranked statewide?" That was the final straw. Years of bottled-up frustration and resentment erupted, igniting a fire within me that could no longer be contained. With trembling fingers I created a new blog, pouring my heart and soul into every word. This would be my voice, my platform to expose the injustice of parental favoritism that had plagued my life. Little did I know, the spark I had ignited would soon become an inferno, one that would consume everything in its path. and changed the course of my life forever. In the weeks that followed my state competition victory, the euphoria of accomplishment slowly faded, replaced by a familiar ache of neglect. As the accolades trickled in, my family's indifference was deafening. "Congratulations on your win," Aunt Marla offered half-heartedly during one of our rare interactions. "It's just too bad it couldn't be a real sport like Kale's." Her words stung like a slap across the face, magnifying the sense of injustice that had been simmering within me. Why was my passion for writing seen as inferior, while Kale's athletic pursuits were placed on a pedestal? The blog, my secret outlet for venting my frustrations, became a beacon of solace. With each entry, I poured out the raw emotions that had been bottled up for far too long, exposing the harsh realities of parental favoritism. Today, my family proved once again that my achievements are nothing more than a footnote in the grand narrative of my brother's success, I wrote, my fingers furiously tapping away at the keyboard. Little did I know, my words were striking a chord with readers far beyond the confines of my small world. Comments flooded in, each one a validation of the pain I had endured. "This speaks volumes about forgotten kids. I can relate to the feelings of neglect so deeply. Keep writing. Your voice is being heard." With each message of support, a newfound sense of purpose ignited within me. I was no longer just venting my personal grievances. I was giving voice to a silent struggle shared by countless others. It was then that the unexpected happened, an email from a publisher expressing interest in turning my blog into a book. They saw the raw, unfiltered emotion in my words and believed my story needed to be shared on a larger scale. For a fleeting moment, I hesitated. Would putting my family's dysfunction on public display only further alienate me from them? But the allure of finally being seen, of having my voice amplified, proved too strong to resist. Without seeking approval or even mentioning it to my relatives, I accepted the publisher's offer. This was my chance to break free from the shadows that had suffocated me for far too long. The following months were a whirlwind of interviews, revisions, and countless sleepless nights spent pouring my soul onto the pages. Each chapter was a cathartic release, a purging of the pain and resentment that had festered for years. Finally, the day of the book launch arrived, and I found myself surrounded by strangers who had become kindred spirits through the shared experience of my words. As I clutched the freshly printed copy, a sense of pride and accomplishment washed over me, a feeling I had craved for so long. But the euphoria was short-lived. Within days, news of my book's controversial subject matter had spread like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of backlash from the very people it exposed. "How could you air our dirty laundry like that?" Aunt Marla's voice crackled through the phone, laced with a mixture of anger and disbelief. It was then that I realized there was no turning back. The consequences of my actions had been unleashed, and the only path forward was through the flames I had ignited myself. The backlash from my family was swift and unrelenting. Aunt Marla's scolding phone call was just the beginning of a firestorm that threatened to consume me entirely. "You've betrayed us all." My mother's shrill voice echoed through the receiver, her words dripping with venom. "How could you put our personal lives on display like that?" I tried to explain, to make them understand the years of neglect and resentment that had fueled my actions, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. They saw only the perceived betrayal, not the pain that had driven me to it. Yet, as the flames of their anger raged, an unexpected force began to rise. A groundswell of support from those who had read my book and found their own stories reflected in its pages. "Thank you for giving a voice to the forgotten ones," read one comment on my blog. "Your courage to speak out is inspiring," another echoed. It was as if a dam had burst, unleashing a torrent of shared experiences and validations from people who had endured similar struggles. The more the backlash from my family intensified, the louder the voices of support became. Suddenly, my once isolated narrative had ignited a movement, a rallying cry for those who had been overlooked and neglected in favor of their siblings' successes. Media outlets began to take notice, eager to amplify the conversation around parental favoritism and its insidious effects. One by one, requests for interviews poured in, each offering a platform for me to share my story on a grander scale. At first, I hesitated, the fear of further alienating my family holding me back. But the echoes of those who had found solace in my words drowned out the doubts, fueling a newfound resolve within me. I accepted the interviews, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each retelling of my experiences. The more I spoke, the more the walls of shame and self-doubt crumbled, replaced by a sense of purpose and validation. You've given a voice to so many who have suffered in silence. One interviewer remarked, her eyes glistening with empathy. As the media frenzy reached fever pitch, my family's efforts to silence me only fueled the flames further. Their attempts to discredit my story and paint me as a disgruntled, attention-seeking child backfired spectacularly, drawing even more attention to the very issues they sought to bury. It was then that an unexpected opportunity presented itself, a publisher eager to capitalize on the growing interest in my story. They saw the potential in expanding my narrative beyond the confines of a blog, offering me a chance to share my experiences on a national scale. Without hesitation, I accepted their offer, my mind already racing with the possibilities of reaching an even wider audience. This was no longer just about venting my personal grievances. It had become a movement, a clarion call for change. With each interview, each article, and each new reader who found solace in my words, the flames of my rebellion burned brighter, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose and the knowledge that I was making a difference in the lives of countless others. The consequences I had once feared had become the very catalysts for my growth and empowerment. And as the smoke cleared, a new path emerged, one that would lead me toward a future beyond the shadows of my family's betrayal. As the firestorm of publicity surrounding my story raged on, the once quiet confines of Aunt Marla's apartment became a battlefield. Her initial disbelief had given way to outright hostility, fueled by the growing media attention. "How could you do this to our family?" she would snarl, her eyes narrowed with contempt. "You've dragged all of our names through the mud." I tried to reason with her, to explain that my intentions were never to hurt or betray, but merely to shed light on a systemic issue that had plagued my life. But my words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the echoes of her anger and disappointment. "You've made your bed, Rowan," she spat. "Now you'll have to lie in it." And lie in it I did, as the consequences of my actions began to unfold in ways I could never have anticipated. My family's efforts to discredit me only added fuel to the fire, drawing even more attention to the very issues they sought to bury. "This is the epitome of parental neglect," one commentator remarked during a televised panel discussion. "The fact that they're trying to silence her only proves her point." With each passing day, the narrative shifted, transforming me from a disgruntled, attention-seeking child into a symbol of resilience and determination. My voice, once muffled by the weight of familial expectations, had become a rallying cry for those who had endured similar struggles. Invitations to speak at events and conferences poured in, each one offering a platform to amplify my message and connect with others who had found solace in my words. With every public appearance, the flames of my rebellion burned brighter, fueled by the knowledge that I was making a tangible difference in people's lives. Yet, amidst the whirlwind of support and validation, the rift within my own family deepened. Aunt Marla's once welcoming home had become a battleground, with tension and resentment hanging thick in the air. "You've made things so much harder for all of us," she would hiss, her words laced with venom. "Is this what you wanted?" In those moments, I had to remind myself of the countless messages from strangers who had found solace in my story. The parents who had vowed to change their ways, the siblings who had found the courage to speak up. My actions had rippled far beyond the confines of my own experience, touching lives in ways I could never have imagined. And so I persisted, weathering the storm of familial backlash with a newfound resolve. Each scathing remark, each attempt to discredit me, only fueled my determination to keep pushing forward, to keep amplifying the voices of those who had been silenced for far too long. The consequences I had once feared had become the catalysts for change, propelling me onto a path that would lead me far beyond the shadows of my family's betrayal. And as I stepped into the spotlight, I vowed to wield its power not for personal gain, but as a beacon of hope for those still trapped in the darkness. Just when I thought the storm of familial backlash had reached its peak, a new twist emerged. one that threatened to unravel the fragile sense of purpose I had cultivated. It was a crisp autumn evening when the doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence that had enveloped Aunt Marla's apartment. With a weary sigh, she rose from her chair, her footsteps heavy with resignation. "Rowan, it's for you," she called out, her voice tinged with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. I braced myself, steeling my nerves for yet another confrontation, another attempt to silence the truth I had so fiercely defended. But nothing could have prepared me for the sight that greeted me at the door. There, standing side by side, were my parents. The very people who had cast me aside in pursuit of my brother's success. Their expressions were a study in contrasts, my mother's face etched with a mixture of shame and defiance, while my father's eyes held a glimmer of what almost seemed like remorse. "Rowan," my mother began, her voice wavering ever so slightly, "we've been thinking a lot, and we want to bring you back home." For a moment I was rendered speechless, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. After everything that had transpired, after the public outcry and the bitter divide they had created, they now sought to welcome me back into the fold? Why? I managed to choke out, my eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What's changed?" It was my father who spoke next, his tone carrying a somberness I had never witnessed before. "Cale's been injured," he said, the words seeming to catch in his throat. "His career, his future, it's all in jeopardy now." Suddenly the pieces began to fall into place. Their sudden desire to reconcile wasn't born of genuine remorse or a newfound appreciation for my struggles. It was a calculated attempt to use my newfound platform and public sympathy to bolster their son's faltering prospects. "So that's it then?" I spat, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You only want me back because you need me to save Cale's career?" Aunt Marla, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "Rowan, maybe you should hear them out," she urged, her eyes pleading with me to keep an open mind. But I had heard enough. The truth, as ugly as it was, had finally been laid bare, stripping away any lingering illusions about my family's motivations. "No," I said firmly, my resolve hardening with each passing second. "I won't be a pawn in your game any longer." With that, I turned on my heel and retreated back into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. The echoes of my parents' protests faded into the distance, drowned out by the overwhelming sense of validation that coursed through my veins. They had revealed their true colors, confirming what I had suspected all along. Their love and acceptance were conditional, hinging on my willingness to play a supporting role in Cale's narrative. As I paced the confines of the apartment, a newfound determination took root within me. If they thought I would simply capitulate and play along with their charade, they were sorely mistaken. It was time to take a stand, to confront them publicly and expose the depths of their conditional affection. The world had rallied behind my story, my voice, and now I would wield that power to shatter the facade they had so carefully constructed. With trembling fingers, I began to draft a statement, pouring my emotions onto the page with a fervor that betrayed years of pent-up frustration. This would be my moment, my opportunity to reclaim the narrative and reveal the ugly truth that had been obscured for far too long. As the words took shape, a sense of liberation washed over me. I was no longer the forgotten child, relegated to the shadows of my family's ambitions. I was a force to be reckoned with, a voice that would not be silenced, and the world was about to bear witness to my defiance. The air was thick with tension as I stepped into the dimly lit coffee shop, my hands trembling ever so slightly. This was it. The moment I had been both dreading and anticipating, the culmination of years of pent-up frustration and resentment. My parents sat huddled together at a corner table, their faces a mask of apprehension and confusion. They had come at my insistence, summoned to this public venue under the guise of seeking reconciliation. But reconciliation was the furthest thing from my mind. This was my chance to confront them, to strip away the facade of familial devotion they had so carefully constructed, and expose the truth that had been obscured for far too long. As I approached the table, their eyes met mine, a flicker of hope mingled with trepidation. "Rowan," my mother began, her voice strained, "we're so glad you agreed to meet with us." I said nothing, simply taking my seat across from them, my gaze unwavering. The silence stretched on, thick and palpable, as I let the tension build, savoring the power I now held. Finally I spoke, my voice steady and resolute. "Why did you really come back for me?" My father exchanged a puzzled glance with my mother before turning back to me. "We've already told you, sweetheart. We want to bring you home to be a family again." I shook my head slowly, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "No, that's not it. You only want me back because of Cale's injury, because you need the public's sympathy to save his career." The words hung in the air like a heavy shroud, their weight suffocating. My parents' expressions shifted, a mixture of shock and anger flickering across their faces. "How dare you accuse us of such a thing?" my mother hissed, her eyes narrowing with fury. "We are your parents, and we only want what's best for you." It was then that I knew I had struck a nerve, exposed the raw truth that they had so desperately tried to conceal. With a deep breath, I pressed on, determined to unravel the tangled web of lies they had woven. "Really?" I challenged, leaning forward in my chair. "Then tell me, if Cale's career hadn't been jeopardized, would you have ever come back for me?" The silence that followed was deafening, a silent admission of the truth we all knew but had refused to acknowledge. My parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces a study in conflicted emotions. Finally, it was my father who spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "Rowan, you have to understand, your brother's future was our priority. We couldn't let anything stand in the way of his success." There it was, the ugly truth laid bare for all to see. Their love, their acceptance, had always been conditional, a twisted hierarchy where my dreams and aspirations were mere footnotes in the grand narrative of Cale's ascent. "So, that's it then?" I shot back, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and vindication. "Is it really me you came for, or is it the public sympathy you need for Cale?" The silence that followed was deafening. A silent admission of the truth we all knew but had refused to acknowledge. My parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces a study in conflicted emotions. But I wasn't finished. With a steely resolve, I pressed on, determined to expose the depths of their betrayal to the world. "You see, this is exactly why I wrote that book, why I shared our story," I declared, my voice rising in defiance. "Because for too long, families like ours have operated under the illusion of unconditional love, when in reality, it's all about meeting certain conditions, sacrificing one child's dreams for another's." As the words spilled forth, I could feel the weight of years of resentment and neglect lifting from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of liberation and purpose. Around us, the hushed murmurs of the coffee shop patrons had given way to rapt attention, as if the entire room was holding its collective breath, hanging on my every word. In that moment, I knew I had won. The facade had crumbled, the truth laid bare for all to see. My parents sat before me, their masks stripped away, exposed as the flawed, conditional figures they truly were. And as the world bore witness to my defiance, a newfound sense of strength coursed through my veins. I was no longer the forgotten child, relegated to the shadows of my family's ambitions. I was a force to be reckoned with, a voice that would not be silenced. And this was only the beginning. The air was electric with excitement as I stepped into the bustling bookstore, the familiar scent of freshly printed pages mingling with the chatter of eager fans. This was a moment I had once only dreamed of, a celebration of my story, my journey, and the power of a single voice to ignite a movement. Aunt Marla stood at the front of the crowd, her face beaming with pride, a stark contrast to the indifference she had once shown. By her side were the friends I had made along the way, kindred spirits who had found solace and validation in my words and had rallied to my side as steadfast supporters. "Rowan, we're all so incredibly proud of you," Aunt Marla gushed, enveloping me in a warm embrace. "Who would have thought that your little blog would turn into this?" I smiled, my cheeks flushing with a mixture of humility and triumph. It had been a long, arduous journey, fraught with pain and heartbreak, but also immense growth and self-discovery. As I took my seat at the signing table, the first fan stepped forward, clutching a copy of my book with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Your words gave me the courage to speak up about my own struggles." One by one, they came, each with their own story, their own journey that had intersected with mine. A mother who had vowed to change her ways, a sibling who had found the strength to confront long-buried resentments. My words had struck a chord, resonating far beyond the confines of my personal experience. With each signature, each heartfelt exchange, I felt a sense of purpose and validation that transcended any accolade or achievement. This was no longer just about my story. It was about giving a voice to the voiceless, shining a light on the insidious impacts of parental favoritism and conditional love. As the line dwindled and the event drew to a close, Aunt Marla approached me once more, her eyes shining with a newfound understanding and appreciation. "Rowan, I owe you an apology," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "For so long, I was blinded by the idea of supporting Cale's dreams that I failed to see the pain and neglect you were enduring." I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand, silencing me with a gentle shake of her head. "No, let me finish. What you've accomplished here, the lives you've touched, the conversations you've sparked, it's made me realize that true love, true support, isn't about putting one child on a pedestal at the expense of the other. It's about nurturing each unique talent, each individual dream, and creating an environment where everyone feels valued and seen." Her words washed over me like a soothing balm, healing wounds I hadn't even realized were still raw. To have the person who had once epitomized my family's conditional love now embracing the very ideals I had fought so hard to uphold was a victory beyond measure. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my newfound family, the friends, supporters, and kindred spirits who had rallied to my side, I knew that I had found something far more precious than any blood tie could offer. "You've made us all so proud, more than any sport or blog ever could," Aunt Marla continued, her voice thick with emotion. "And I promise, from this day forward, to be the kind of supportive presence you deserved all along." In that moment, I felt a sense of closure, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The resentment, the anger, the years of neglect, they no longer held the same power over me. As I embraced Aunt Marla, surrounded by the warmth and acceptance of my chosen family, I knew that I had already won. The consequences of my actions, once so feared, had become the catalysts for personal growth and societal change. And as I looked towards the future, I saw endless possibilities, a world where no child would ever have to endure the pain of conditional love, a world where every dream, every talent would be nurtured and celebrated. With a renewed sense of purpose and determination, I vowed to continue amplifying the voices of the overlooked, using my platform to inspire and empower others to stand up and demand the recognition they deserved. This was no longer just my story. It was a movement, a rallying cry for change that would echo far beyond the pages of a book. And as I stepped out into the world, my head held high, I knew that I was no longer the forgotten child, relegated to the shadows of someone else's ambitions. I was a force to be reckoned with, a voice that would not be silenced. And this was only the beginning.